You don't want to leave something on the table, and you spend a lot of time at work. You spend 40, 60 more hours there. So you want to make sure that whatever offer you're signing is what you're going to feel really happy about. You could be losing out on money. You go through the whole interview process and they offer you and it comes in like 10K, 50K lower. Like you just wasted a lot of your time and their time too.
What are some of those fears that you've noticed?
I think it's just uncomfortable and you're worried that they're going to think you're all about money. You don't care about the job. You're worried they might rescind the offer, or you're like, that's my future employer. That's my future boss. I think leaning into being genuine and having the conversation and reframing the mindset of like, the recruiter's not an enemy.
Hi, everyone. It's Kailyn. Today, I'm actually the co-host, and we have Sarah as the main host today. But today, we have a very important topic. Negotiating salaries. Obviously, money, benefits, and stuff all goes into that compensation package. And we're going to learn today from Cindy herself what are the best tactics in doing that. Anyway, without further ado, we'll pass it over to Cindy to kick off with an intro, and we'll jump into the questions with Sarah. Hello, Cindy. Thanks for coming.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Hi, my name is Cindy. I started my career actually as a teacher. I taught high school science in Camden, New Jersey. Then I was a recruiter for a few years for a charter school network based out of Harlem, and we have a few schools across the nation. Then I joined a tech startup right before their IPO, did tech recruiting there. And then that's where I learned a lot about negotiation, equity, and then actually went back to that charter school network to lead that talent acquisition team. And for the past 5 years, I've been at a graduate school of education as the VP of talent acquisition and compensation.
Nice. Great. So we definitely have the right person on our show today. We'll just kick it off into why does salary negotiation matter? And I'll say like maybe compensation negotiation, however you want to take it. But why does that matter to someone? Why should they like listen to today's episode?
Mm-hmm. It's really important because you don't want to leave something on the table. And you spend a lot of time at work. You spend 40, 60 more hours there. So you want to make sure that whatever offer you're signing is what you're going to feel really happy about. Of course, maybe you're happy about the role, the team, the projects, but if you're not happy about the salary, or if you have this lingering thought of maybe I left some money on the table, or I could have asked for more, or like how did they set that salary? It's just not going to be great for you. So it's really important to ask. And a lot of organizations, some are really good at compensation and some are not so great. So if you're really not asking and it's an organization that maybe doesn't have a great philosophy yet, you could be losing out on money.
Yeah, that makes sense. And money's, I didn't look at the stat, but I'm assuming it's probably one of the top 2 most important things.
Yeah, it's incredibly important.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you don't want to find out later on that maybe your coworker who's doing the same job is getting more money than you. So I'm always like, shoot your shot and see what happens.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to ask, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. So what are some common fears that job seekers may have when it comes to negotiating salaries? What are they? Because I've heard people say like, oh, I'm afraid to ask. Is it just the asking that they're afraid of, or what are some of those fears that you've noticed?
I think it's just uncomfortable,
yeah.
Right? To like know what your worth is and kind of in some ways feel like you're demanding that from someone and you're worried that they're going to think you're all about money. You don't care about the job. You're worried they might rescind the offer, or you're like, that's my future employer. That's my future boss. And I'm like asking them for more money. Like it just feels wrong and uncomfortable. And then you have to have that conversation with someone. And when you have that fear, I think it doesn't feel great for a lot of people. And it's easier to just be like, okay, let's just sign this offer and like start the job rather than face that uncomfortable kind of conversation. But recruiters are trained and they expect people to ask. So it's not a horrible thing to be trying to do.
Yeah, and that makes sense from the candidate side. Like with a recruiter, we're so used to it, but on the candidate side, it's not something that they do on a day-to-day. So I could see how that could be like really nerve-wracking. But I'll pass it to Sarah for your questions.
Yeah, well, I actually think it's really interesting that you say expect it because Career Builder had put out a statistic that I think it was 73% of recruiters or hiring managers are expecting at least like a counter offer or negotiation, and only 55% of candidates actually do it.
Yeah.
Which I think, leads back to the fear of it.
Yeah.
So it's funny you say that.
Yeah.
But awesome. So I am wondering, for candidate perspective, do you think it's the timing aspect. Should they have it on that first initial call? Should they wait until an offer is given to them or during interviews?
I definitely think that you should be on the same page with the recruiter or at least that company in the beginning as much as possible about what your salary expectations are and also how they set salary. Because if there's a huge discrepancy in the beginning and you go through the whole interview process and they offer you and it comes in like 10K, 50K lower, like you just wasted a lot of your time and their time too. So I always think it's important in the beginning not to negotiate, but to understand how they set their salary or what the range is. Because maybe some companies will put like our range is 100 to 150, but your non-negotiable is like 130. But how they set the salary is everyone starts at 100K. And now you get the offer and you're like, well, that's 30K lower. And they're like, we don't negotiate. And so I think it's really important in the beginning to kind of have that conversation with the recruiter. And maybe if it's a little bit off, because they're like, oh, we can't tell you until we do the offer, but likely it'll be somewhere between 100 to 120, something like that. That's helpful. And then I think the actual negotiation happens later on when you get the offer. But yeah, I think in the beginning, being on the same page is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so the beginning conversation, I think it's a battle like recruiters and candidates always have is, what if they, as a recruiter, ask for your number first? What would your suggestion be to candidates on how to handle that?
Yeah, I think it's really changing the mindset and framing that it's not a battle. Because I think a lot of people think the recruiter is like this not bad person, but like they're trying to like lowball you or sneak or do something. And I think especially because a lot of states are passing pay transparency laws, which is a really great thing. And a lot of organizations are also remote, so they have to follow a lot of those laws now.
Yeah.
That companies are, starting to get a lot better about how they set salary and how transparent they are. I think it is changing the mindset. And then I think it's really understanding like the range that you feel comfortable with the recruiter and being just like genuine. Because like I said before, you want to be on the same page. So if the salary range is 50 to 70K, but you really want 100 to 150K, you should upfront tell them like, I am looking for 100 to 150K. Can you tell me how you set salary or how compensation is determined here at this organization? And they can be like, hey, like that is part of our range, but like I can't tell you how we set it until we like look at your resume, you do your interviews, but we might be somewhere between there. And I think also too, like internally, you have to do your own kind of research to look at one, what do you want? Like, what is a number that you do not want to go below? Maybe because you already have a certain salary history, maybe because you have a certain like living expense, right? If you know, like, I can't go below 100K, that is super important to know personally. And then I also think you should do your research on, what does the industry say that this role is worth? And just be open and honest with the recruiter if that is what you're looking for. And then I would say, too, if the organization has their salary range, like I know some people are fearful. They're like, oh, if I say a number that's really low, they're going to give me that low number.
Yeah.
So I think you can also say, like, hey, can you tell me more about how you all determine compensation? I'm curious to hear about that. And then flip it back to the recruiter to have them explain how they set salary. And then you can kind of then massage and figure out like, okay, like how do I want to play this? Like, should I give a range? Like, okay, that's really interesting. So yeah, that's how I would approach it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you made a good point as well as like the kind of being the bad guy. People look at recruiters or that it really isn't a battle. So sometimes recruiters just they don't share it at the beginning. What would you say is a reason why they don't share it? And if that should be a red flag or if that's normal for candidates to experience?
I would say that it's odd if a recruiter didn't share the range, just because, like, for me personally, I would want to work at an organization that is as transparent as possible, and could tell me, like, how they set that salary and how my salary grows over time there at the organization. I don't know why organization would hide the salary.
Yeah, I guess if
Yeah.
it was like at that first call, like sometimes you hop on a call and candidates will say immediately, what's the salary? Sometimes recruiters will go around it until the end of the call. So I guess like to a candidate, what would be the reasoning behind why sometimes recruiters do that?
I mean, I think there could be a few reasons. Maybe they don't even know like
Yeah.
what the offers are.
Yeah.
Maybe they also are trying to get intel themselves about like what people are going to ask for, and then they're going to bring it back to organization and be like, "Hey, lots of people are saying 50K or 70K, like let's budget it
Yeah.
there." And they're trying to do their own market research. But yeah, I think that's probably some reasons why.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And so, what would you say would be kind of like a step-by-step quick breakdown on how someone should prepare to go into those conversations of negotiating a salary or having those initial talks?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the first thing is someone really needs to do their own kind of like, not soul searching, but they need to think about like, what are the top 3 things that you're looking for in a role? Because I think those are kind of your guiding lights to how you're going to do the negotiation, right? And it could be, a lot of people often say like, I'm looking for a role that like challenges me and I'm really interested in the work. And like, I get that. You spend so much time at work. Like, you don't want to do boring things.
Yeah.
So, like, that's really important. Some people are like, career growth is really important to me. A lot of people these days are like, work-life flexibility, remote work is really important to them. A lot of people might be like, hours are important, and salary is always in there, of course. Like, people need to make a living. But I think someone really needs to think about that. Like, what's important? Maybe I want 20 days of PTO. Maybe I don't care about PTO. Maybe I want free insurance. Maybe like it doesn't matter because I'm on my husband's insurance or something like that. So all those I think are really important. And I think after, it's then looking at the job that you're offered. How does it meet kind of that scorecard of what you're looking for? And then determining how much money like you want based on all of that, what they offer, and then what's in the market. And they say it's competitive. So say like you're offered 100K, but it's a remote role. So you're like, that's great. But you're offered 150K for another organization, but it's a 1-hour commute. Like that's
Yeah, you need to know your
salary is
priority.
important.
Yeah.
But you need to know your priority there too. And so, but you can use that offer to negotiate with the first one and say like, hey, I got this offer for 150K, like, but I'm really interested in your organization for X, Y, Z reasons. The projects you're working on are amazing. I love the team that I met with. Like, is there any flexibility? Because I did get this offer for 150K and I need to make this decision within 2 days or something. And that kind of puts pressure on the other organization.
And that's
to
a big
figure it
like
out.
salary
And
difference
that's a huge
too.
gap. Yeah. You don't need to tell them that it's not remote and you got to drive like an hour.
Don't tell them
But
that.
like that can be really helpful. But yeah, and I think just leaning into being honest and genuine. And so that's how I would approach it. I would also say setting up an email and then asking for a call is always really helpful because it's harder to say no to someone via email. It's a lot more personal when you can talk to someone, negotiate over the phone or in person. I know it's uncomfortable, but I mean, for the recruiter too, to just be more genuine about like, I just bought a house or I just had a baby, like all of that. And that personal touch is also can be really helpful too. An organization shouldn't change your salary just because you like bought a house or anything, but like it gives context on like, oh, okay, I know where this person's coming from. So I would say negotiation, you can always set it up via email if you want to be like really structured and like use ChatGPT to write this awesome email, but then be like, can we talk on the phone? I think it's just more human.
Yeah, I feel like that kind of catches them off guard too. Like as a recruiter and someone's asking me for a counter, which happens all the time. It just catches you in that moment and you like have to respond. You don't have time to like read the email and be like, how do we strategize? Well, you know, like it's like I have to give this person an answer right now. You know, not literally. I mean, I could say, let me call you back and stuff, but there's still that pressure. And I feel like putting that pressure on the recruiter or hiring manager will end up benefiting you probably likely more. I mean, for me at least, but that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah.
And you can talk about more things too if the recruiter about like, hey, tell me more about the insurance, tell me more about the PTO policy. So that's just helpful.
Yeah. I also am curious to your thoughts on, so I feel like a lot of candidates that we speak with, they are leaving companies because of compensation. Like they might love their company, but compensation isn't aligned. And a lot of people tend to avoid those conversations. Would your advice, like step by step as well, be the same for having salary negotiation conversations internally at your company? Or would you have any other advice?
Yeah, it's really hard because there's only so much bending of rules an organization can do. And I know that a lot of people say in order to get like a higher salary, switching jobs, switching organizations is often like the best way to do that.
Yeah.
Unless the salary growth at your current organization is just like really, really competitive. But like people can get different offers and jump like 20%.
Yeah.
Internally, you can't do that without causing internal inequity between employees. So that would be really hard. Though I have seen recently that salaries now have gone down. So when people doing job hunting, the increase is a lot smaller than before. During the pandemic, it was like crazy high. You can get like wild offers, and now it's really calmed down. So it's not as I guess scary to some degree for an organization to like lose talent that way. But I would say like what you should do is pretty much the same thing. Think about like what's important for you, right? You really love the organization. You love their policies. They're really generous with their medical benefits. The culture is amazing. You just want a little bit more. So that internally, then do your research and then like talk to your manager about like what does salary growth look like? How can you achieve that? Is it through promotion? Is it through annual increases? Is it through bonuses? And kind of talk that through. And hopefully the organization has an answer for you. And if it's not the one that fits into what your personal matrix is, like it might be that you should look for a different job opportunity, but also know like maybe that job opportunity, like their insurance is more expensive. So them giving you 10K more actually doesn't mean anything. So it's all about like, what do you really want from your ideal job? And then trying to find it as much as possible.
Yeah, we see that a lot. Like even with our company, our clients, people will just jump right at the money. Oh, salary, I'm getting 10K more. And then we kind of like break it down because I don't know if we're curious. We're in the industry, but we're like, they jump for 10K more, but now their commissions are 50% less on the same productivity.
Yeah.
They don't have their 401k as half the match.
Yeah.
They left 2 weeks before vesting period. Like all these things, like you really actually left 30 grand a year on the table and they don't even see it. So that's a whole nother like benefits topic. But I think people don't realize that salary is not the only place probably the only place you're making money outside of a 401k, but there's other places where you're saving money in terms of the full comp benefits, commission, bonus, all that stuff like you mentioned. So I think someone like you said, like the step one, what are your priorities in this? Because if you just jump for the salary, what I was saying is they've moved for the salary, but now they don't have work-life balance. Now they're in the office working 60 hours a week where they're only doing, 40 at their last place. And now they're miserable, but they have more money.
Yeah.
And, it's just money isn't always going to make you happy in that job so much better. Like you said, what are your priorities? That's what you should, be shooting for. So I like that. Anyway, sorry.
It's really important. And also too, like when I used to work at the tech startup, it was interesting because our offers had equity and a base salary. And depending on where people were in their lives, sometimes they were okay taking kind of like a lower pay for more equity, but that's riskier. And some people are like, no, I just bought a house. Like, I need the cash. Like, the equity, I don't really care too much. And so it was interesting to kind of be like, well, tell me what you want. Because me as a recruiter, my job is for you to sign, right? I'm not your enemy.
No.
We really like you. We want you here. I want you to sign. So tell me as much as possible what you want. And I can tell you we can do it or we can't. And I'm going to be as honest as possible. Because if, I'm not honest and you don't sign, then I need to go find a new candidate. So that I don't want to do that. So that's why I'm saying, like, I think leaning into being genuine and having the conversation and reframing the mindset of like the recruiter's not an enemy. Like they really want you to get a job that you really care about.
I think people forget that recruiters, it's our job to, fill roles, but we also have KPIs and stuff on how long that person stays. We're not just filling it to fill it a body in a seat. It's like we want the person to be happy because they're going to stay. We want our hiring manager to be happy because they're going to keep them. Like we want a long-term employee. Obviously, I'm talking about direct hire employees, not like contract and stuff. But even so, they don't want the contractor to not be good or happy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think people forget that, and that we actually had an episode called "How to Make something about making your recruiters your ally" or something like that. So. Yeah, it kind of goes into that too.
And I think to piggyback on that, if we're lowballing our candidates and they find out and they're a highly qualified candidate, they're going to leave pretty soon. They're not going to be like, oh, great, this low salary and stay.
They got me. I have to stay now.
They're going to leave or they're going to ask for more soon. So it doesn't benefit anyone to kind of be like, oh, man, I got this candidate for $50K less. They should have asked for more, you know.
You're like, we're not celebrating that.
No, it doesn't feel good. Yeah.
No, not at all.
And kind of also piggybacking off of what you said, so if they can't do it, we'll be upfront as a recruiter saying that salary is too high. What would you recommend for a candidate? How would they handle that conversation, or what should they say to that if salary is not aligned and they can't go any higher?
I think it's the same thing, like reevaluating like what it is that you really want, and then seeing if the organization kind of hits on all the other things you want, like remote. If it's remote, but then you're like, it's 10K lower than what I wanted, maybe that's okay. And like you're okay with that. But if you're not, don't go further in the process unless the recruiter says like, oh, maybe we'll make it happen. I see a lot of times candidates will be like, oh, that's fine. And they'll keep going. And they expect that they're going to interview so well. And then we're going to throw all this money at them and be like, it's okay. There's a 50K gap. And it's like, usually that doesn't happen. And if an organization does that, that means internally there's probably a lot of internal equity issues then, because if they're just responding to every whim that someone asks for, internally it's probably pretty messy. And I personally would not want to be part of an organization that does that.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about like who tends to negotiate more, and it tends to be men. So if an organization's willing to do that, you're going to see probably issues in terms of who's getting paid more at that organization. Yeah.
And what would you say, so if they can't go higher, would you say there's anything else that a candidate can negotiate? So whether that be PTO or more flexible schedule, like would you recommend if someone says that salary is too high, as a candidate, like what other things can they negotiate?
Yeah, I think you can always try. You can ask about their benefits. I think another really important question is to ask, how does salary grow over time at that organization? Because maybe it grows really well over there. And you're like, oh, okay, I got it. Like, I'm going to take this slight pay cut for this job that I'm really, really interested in. But every year my salary will grow in this way. Awesome. That sounds really great. Or maybe they're like, it doesn't really grow. You get 2% every year, or like maybe you don't even get the 2%. And you're like, oh, no, like that doesn't work well for me. So I think that question is also really important too when you're approaching negotiation. I would say those two, like how do you set salary here at your organization, and how does my salary grow over time here? And then that can really help you understand, okay, what does this offer mean?
Yeah, I love that. On the flip side of that, is there anything you would recommend you don't say, or phrases you've seen people say where it really hurt their candidacy?
It's a good question. I mean, I think when people just go in and they're like, I don't know, I don't care, like that's probably not going to be a great answer in general. Or they're like, anything, like I've just been looking forever for a job.
The desperate.
Yeah,
we talked about that before.
That's probably not a good thing to say. Like, but I think for the most part, people do a lot better in interviews than they think, and people don't say too many odd things. Yeah,
that's good.
Just for clarity for the audience, when you guys were talking about negotiating, obviously you mentioned with salary, that needs to be at the beginning of the conversation, but negotiating the extras, is that still at the beginning with the recruiter, like just getting aligned on that first call before moving forward, even when it comes to like benefits, PTO, remote work bonus, like all that needs to be the first couple calls, or
it's
over time?
Hard, right? Because a phone screen is so short. It's like 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. And the recruiter's trying to tell you about the role. They're trying to ask you questions and dig in to see how well you can answer them. And then they're going through like logistics of like, when can you start? What salary expectations? So there's usually only like 5 minutes or so for a candidate to be asking questions, and you don't know if you're going to move past phone screen, all of that stuff. So it's kind of hard then to like drill the recruiter on like, tell me about the benefits. How much would I pay monthly? Tell me about like, do you have WageWorks? Like, what is the matching? That can be really intense.
Yeah.
And I don't think probably a good time to be asking the recruiter because they're so busy. They're like doing phone screens back to back, and they're like, we're screening 20 candidates. This is like too much detail. So I think that's a really good question. I would focus on aligning on salary first. And then as you keep on going on in the process, maybe ask a little bit about benefits as you're building that rapport with the recruiter. So I'd say probably like final interview or like right before the interview, you can ask a few more questions, or after the interview, just email the recruiter and be like, hey, I have a few follow-up questions. You have like a overview of the benefits or anything like that. But I think the key point here is probably the phone screen, you're not like interrogating the recruiter on all the fringe benefits.
Yeah. And I like the email because I feel like every company has their benefits, like a benefits summary, or like I've had clients send us, because we always get it from our clients, like the entire employee handbook. They're like, here's just everything. We're like, yes.
Yeah.
So we can just send that, like you can read it on your own time and then call me if you have kind of questions. You mentioned earlier that stat about counters. So what do you think? Should everyone counter no matter what, or how should they go about countering? Maybe even, let me just give you a specific example. If they get an offer and it's what their recruiter talked about, they ask for 100K, offers 100K. Should someone counter just to try to get more, or what do you think about that?
I know I keep saying the same thing, but I think it's going back to like, sorry, but I think it's going back to just asking the recruiter, like, how did you set my salary? And like understanding, like, they do it based on years of experience? Do they do it based on your performance in the interview? Because that can really help you understand, okay, that makes sense. You did it based on years of experience. I have 5 years. It's a step system or something like that. That's how you did it. Or you can be like, oh, you did it based on 5 years, but actually I did this, whatever. It should be 7 years or something. And then you can use that to be like, I should have a higher salary based on how you set salaries.
Well, there's like a myth on like LinkedIn. Oh, well, maybe not a myth. Maybe it's true. I obviously don't interview a lot and get jobs, but I'm on the other side. But people are like, always counter, no matter what. If you're happy, counter. Just counter. Always counter for 5K more, 10K more. So I see everyone say that. Do you see that?
I do, but I think you also have to like really read the room and remember your initial conversation. Because if you're going back and forth already with your recruiter and you kind of already negotiated at the beginning, and then you go again to negotiate, and then the recruiter's thinking to themselves, well, we already had this conversation. Why are we pushing for even more?
Yeah, and the recruiters and hiring managers talk. And we're like, they're so happy with this. And we try to get someone happy about the salary. We don't try to like talk them into it, because then it's going to fall back once they sit down and logically think for a little bit, you know? But yeah, so you're saying, so you would say if it's already been negotiated, you had like a longer than normal maybe conversation about the salary in the beginning, take that offer. It's probably in your best interest to take the offer.
I think if it's like already aligned, like with what you talked about, and in the interview, everything is still aligned. Because I have seen that a lot. They say no matter what, when you get an offer, you should counter, which if you've already had those like initial conversations, sometimes I think that can be a little too pushy.
Yeah, it can be hard. I also think though, like at the end is when you see more of the benefits and the fringe benefits. So you can be like, hey, actually, I looked over your insurance and it costs like 5K more than my current organization. And, you know, I'm losing 10 PTO days or something like that. I know we previously discussed that I was okay with XYZ salary, but considering this and now looking at the full package, I now think XYZ is a more competitive salary, and I would be happy with that. But also reiterate, like, you're so excited about the job. You really want to work with manager Bob and like work on XYZ project, all of that stuff. And I think framing it in that way is really helpful. So it can be weird, right? If you agreed on a salary in the beginning, but then at the end you can be like, hey, I like actually looked at this full package and like it's not adding up to me. So I think to your original question about always asking, like, I'm always like, you should shoot your shot because you never know how strong that organization is in terms of a compensation philosophy. Maybe they are really good and they're like, no, we don't negotiate. Or maybe they miss something. Maybe they miss the years of experience or some skill you have and there's some room there. Or maybe their organization who's like maybe really bad and they do actually allow for wild negotiation. So you might as well go on the ride with them. So I don't think it hurts to always try at least asking like, how did you set my offer? And then you have time to process because there's only so much back and forth you can do at the end. So you kind of need to.
Yeah. I've seen people overdo it too and lose and have the offer retracted.
Yeah.
Because
And
they'll
then
just say something like absurd and way off the rails. And we're like, whoa, okay, this was. And then it gives the hiring manager cold feet like, I was not expecting this from this person. We're restarting.
Yeah. And that could be really weird. And so I think it's just leaning in and being very genuine about like what you're looking for so the recruiter can understand that, and also for you to be curious too with the recruiter and ask them questions like, tell me more about this benefit, tell me more about how you set the salary. Oh, you did it based on this or whatever. Okay, then you go home and then you think about it, review all of it, and write a beautiful email back that's very strong, and then have a conversation with them. Because if you kind of do a piecemeal, like the back and forth with a recruiter multiple times, that's going to get frustrating. I would say you want like the conversation to be, maybe 2 or 3 emails, 2 or 3 conversations, and then like hopefully you get to the spot you want to be at.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we always say to like always do it over the phone. This because then now your emails are getting forwarded to the hiring manager. If the hiring manager thinks you handled it differently, then there's so much room for error. And then the recruiters are so used to talking about negotiations, and the hiring managers aren't so much, and they almost get offended because they're like very proud of their offers. Like, I chose this number, spot on. They're going to be happy. And then, so they don't really get it as much as recruiters. No offense, hiring managers, if anyone's watching, but we do it better. I like how you said, set the salary expect. I'm just kind of going back to that real quick. I think that's important. I haven't heard that before actually, but asking how do you create your salaries?
I know,
it's really cool.
Yeah.
Because if someone asked me that, I would, well, maybe it's the staffing thing, but I would go back to my hiring managers because obviously we're hiring for other companies. So we don't have the salary band and how they do it, but we just know their budget and what they want. And it's like, well, we know how a candidate could get more money. If someone asked me that, I'd be like, well, my hiring manager will pay you more. Do you have your own clients you could bring in? How much is that worth? And then now they're getting a priority list from the hiring managers. They have their priorities. Hiring manager has their priorities. And if you hit the hiring manager's priorities, then you're going to get a higher offer or more likely to get your counter accepted, in my opinion. So if you're not asking that, and then now you're almost interview prepped, it's like, oh, that's what's important to the hiring manager. I know it's a little bit different than what you're saying with the band. But then that's going to, now you know kind of what to focus on in the interview. It's like, oh, okay, you want like a Wolf of Wall Street salesperson. Like now I know how to present myself, because other people freak out about that, even though they're in sales too, same industry. So that's good. So counter with a purpose, just to wrap up the last one. So have a purpose, come genuine with that counter. Don't like what I'm gathering to is probably not just ask for more money to ask for more money. Or if you are, at least give a purpose.
And like frame it in like the why.
Genuine. Here's why I need it. Other offers, or have this house. I know the hiring manager wanted this, that, the other, or your salary band said master's degree, just completed that, whatever it is. And then that will get you to that. Yes. Because then the recruiters go to the hiring team to get that counter approved, just for more for the listeners right now. And whatever the candidate says, we kind of parrot it to the hiring manager. So if you can sell the recruiter, we typically can sell the hiring manager. So if someone's saying, well, I just did this and I have all these things, we can say, well, hiring manager, they want more money because they just did this and they had all these things. And now we can sell that person because we want to fill the role and want you to be happy. So,
And a lot of times hiring managers might be like, okay, cool, here's an extra like 1,000, 2,000 once they see that.
Or sign-on bonus.
Yeah, or a sign-on bonus. They're like, okay, I see what this person's trying to bring to the table, but I can't go above this. So like a sign-on bonus, or like, okay, we have another 1,000, like let's just give it to them. So I don't think it hurts to always try and ask.
Yeah, why not?
So what is your favorite resume database?
Oh. I mean, I think LinkedIn is always wonderful. LinkedIn Recruiter, like digging into that is always, it's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
And favorite song right now?
Oh gosh. Well,
Very off topic.
I had a baby a few months ago, so we honestly listen every morning to the veggie song and we sing it because I'm trying to hopefully
song? Like the Veggie Tales?
It's just about vegetables, about how
I
you
love
love
that.
eating vegetables, and I'm
Oh.
like, maybe he'll like vegetables in a few months when he starts
love
solids.
that.
So yeah, that's what I listen to every morning.
It's not the one that goes, I like to eat apples and
No,
banana
it's not
or
that.
whatever.
No, but I should put that on for him, but he doesn't know. It's a veggie song. It's about loving vegetables.
Oh, I need to listen to that. Maybe my diet will change.
Yeah.
Same.
Cool. Well,
funny.
thank you, Cindy, for coming.
Of course.
Thanks for hosting, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for joining in and listening. Please like, subscribe, comment if you have any questions, and we'll get back to you. And share your story on how you negotiated your salary and got what you want, or maybe you didn't get what you want. Thanks for watching.